from the states and territories. Ministers have agreed to conduct a national firearms amnesty aimed at reducing the number of unregistered firearms in Australia. Now, this is not a buyback. It is and it is not targeted at law-abiding firearm owners. The amnesty will provide an opportunity for people who, for whatever reason, are in possession of an unregistered firearm to hand it in without fear of being prosecuted. The amnesty is expected to commence in the middle of next year, and it will be up to each jurisdiction to implement it in their own way. The illegal trafficking of firearms is a deadly crime, and just one illegal firearm, you can appreciate, could do an enormous amount of damage in the Australian community. The coalition government has put in place since we've come to office a range of measures to combat illegal firearms in our community, and we've had unprecedented cooperation with the states and territories to remove illegal firearms from our streets. And this move for a national amnesty today is another step along that road. Today, I'm also pleased to join with the CEO of the ACIC to release our first unclassified assessment of the illicit firearms market. The ACIC's Illicit Firearms in Australia report outlines law enforcement's current understanding of the nature and extent of the illicit firearms market. It conservatively estimates that there are around 260,000 firearms, about 250,000 of those are long arms and about 10,000 of those are handguns on our streets. Australia is world renowned for the strength of our firearm laws, but illegal firearms do remain a deadly weapon of choice for organised criminals. The Illicit Firearms in Australia report helps us identify appropriate responses that keep illegal firearms off our streets, and of course it identifies the resources and the powers that we need to equip our law enforcement agencies with to deal with the threat. That is why the Coalition is also committed to providing tougher penalties for those in Australia who would engage in gun smuggling. Mandatory minimum sentences of 5 years send a strong and very clear message that gun-related crime and violence will not be tolerated in our community. These stronger laws that have sadly been blocked in the Parliament by the Labor Party will be a strong deterrent if the Parliament agrees to pass them, and I again call on the Labor Party to join with us in providing stronger penalties for gun smuggling. Now, I would like to thank the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission for the work that they have put into this unclassified intelligence assessments on the illegal firearms market in Australia. I'm going to ask the CEO to provide some further detail about the report, and then I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Minister. The use and acquisition of illicit firearms in the Australian community is a national problem, and it is serious. Criminals use weapons for both intimidation, for use in crimes, and one illegal firearm in the Australian community is one too many. This assessment is the first that the ACIC has conducted in an unclassified sense. The criminal intelligence material that we regularly provide to Australian police and law enforcement agencies around the country is generally in a classified environment, and that is an ongoing piece of work. But in this sense, this document informs the Australian community and does inform any opportunities for further enhancement of Australia's tough gun laws, which are some of the toughest in the world. Some of the key judgments from this document refer to a wide range that criminals will do in terms of acquiring and using firearms in the way they go around their business. They do this to intimidate others, to strengthen their position in criminal offences, and indeed to commit acts of violence. No single organised crime group in Australia dominates this market, but clearly we focus in the Australian law enforcement context on serious and organised crime groups. The way that this assessment presents the picture is that firearms enter the illicit market in Australia through a number of historical and contemporary diversion methods, depending on the firearm type. Organised crime are obviously exploiting the rapid development of technology, both in the way that they procure, and that is a global issue. Criminals are likely to exploit new and emerging trends to traffic illicit firearms. Organised crime and firearms are inextricably linked, and law enforcement response strategies must address both the illicit firearm supply routes and the criminal activities that do drive firearm use. The assessment provides that the intelligence picture of an amount of 250,000 long arms and 10,000 handguns, and that is a conservative estimation. I'll now allow the Minister to take some questions.
All right, well, look, the CEO and I are very happy to take questions on the report, and then I'm very happy to take questions on any other matter. Okay, well, it looks like you're released, Chris. Now, look, I'm very happy to take questions about any matter. Please bear in mind that we're already running late for the second session of the meeting, so go over it.
Did you reach an agreement on classification for the Adler?
Well, unfortunately, and I think everybody would be aware that the updates to the National Firearms Agreement were on the agenda this morning. We haven't been able to reach agreement amongst all the jurisdictions. Look, there is a majority view amongst all the jurisdictions, but the reality is on a national agreement, you do need unanimous agreement from all of the jurisdictions to move forward. The Council has committed to continuing to have that conversation. We have been able to deal with difficult issues in the past. I have been to these Council meetings where we've reached the impasse, and once the Council meeting finishes, we are able to continue that conversation and come to a national agreement. I hope that we can in this case, but unfortunately we haven't been able to do that here this morning. I suppose the important point is, in the absence of a unanimous agreement amongst all jurisdictions, the prohibition on the importation of lever-action shotguns that the Commonwealth Government has put in place will remain. The regulation explicitly states that that prohibition will remain until we get a unanimous agreement, and also until that agreement is actually implemented in every jurisdiction.
Is the majority view for the 5 action to go to B and the 7 to D?
Well, look, I'm happy to talk on behalf of the Commonwealth. I don't want to talk on behalf of other jurisdictions because it really is up to other jurisdictions to talk for themselves. But the role of the Commonwealth has always been to use our good officers to provide a consensus. Now, it's never in, if you're going to have a good faith negotiation, I don't think it's that helpful to have it in the public domain. But we've been working very hard behind the scenes to try and get everybody to agree. As I said, we haven't been able to do that at this morning's session of the meeting, but we have agreed to continue to work on it. And with a bit of goodwill, obviously, we would like that agreement to come into place. But of course, the status quo, which is that the import of lever-action shotguns over the capacity of 5 is going to remain in place until that is the case.
Is it likely that the lifting of the ban is inevitable, or do you think there are circumstances in which the Adler could be permanently banned?
Well, look, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. We have had good faith negotiations. As I said, we have dealt with difficult issues before where there has been vast differences between the various jurisdictions, and we have come to an agreement. We haven't been able to do that. I hope that we can, but at this stage that's not the case, and because that's not the case, the Commonwealth's ban will still be there.
And is it right that the original sunset clause on the Adler import ban was made in mid-2015, was for 10 years, but then changed in September 2015 because of an agreement?
No, that's incorrect. Look, the sunset clause was put on for 12 months. Once it expired after that 12 months, then we renewed the legislation because we weren't going to have a situation where we would have a very significant import, tens of thousands, of these lever-action shotguns with a magazine capacity of over 5.
Was it just New South Wales and Tasmania that didn't approve Category D?
Look, I don't want to talk for other jurisdictions. I think it's fair enough that we allow every jurisdiction to talk for themselves. I'm very happy to talk on behalf of the Commonwealth, but obviously there's 9 jurisdictions in these meetings and I'm not a spokesman for all of them.
When's your next chance to potentially get an agreement?
Well, look, we said we discuss it out of session. These meetings of police ministers occur every 6 months, but we can have a conversation in between meetings, and that is often how we have dealt with difficult issues, and that's what we have resolved to do this morning, to continue to have a conversation out of session in the hope of reaching this national consensus.
So last question, guys. So the import ban will just run continuously until some agreement is reached?
The import ban is explicit. It will run until we get a unanimous agreement with all jurisdictions in Australia about how to classify lever-action shotguns with a magazine capacity of over 5, and until that agreement is implemented. Because, of course, given the vagaries of politics, different jurisdictions will be able to implement the agreement according to their own timetable.
Did the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister Tony Abbott contradict themselves in the House of Representatives?
Look, I don't believe that's the case. Look, our position's always been the same. The Abbott government committed to placing this import ban until there was an agreement amongst the states on the importation of lever-action shotguns of a magazine capacity of over 5, and the Turnbull government has continued that ban. The Commonwealth's position has been entirely consistent throughout that whole process.
But was Tony Abbott's office aware of the discussions and negotiations that you and Minister Dutton had been having with Senator Lionhelm in 2015?
Well, look, I think those questions were answered in the Parliament yesterday, and the answer to that is very clear.
Thanks, Minister.
All right, sorry guys, but I'm keeping everyone waiting.
And that is Justice Minister Keenan. They're confirming that the state and territories have not reached an agreement on the classification of the controversial Adler shotguns, which means the federal government's import ban on this high-capacity lever-action firearm will remain in place for now. Mr Keenan says that conversations will continue between the states and territories, but there needs to be a consensus amongst all of them to reach an agreement. On the issue of whether Mr Abbott's office was aware of these negotiations or not when the import ban came into place, he said the answer was evident in yesterday's parliamentary sitting.